Thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Rob Curtis. I'm joined by my co-presenter Neil Van Pigelen. We work in the enterprise sales team here at Vevox, and we're going to talk you through some effective ways to maximise collaboration and inclusivity within your Microsoft Teams meetings across your organisation. So hopefully from today, you'll give you some hints and tips around how you can do to maximise those two elements. We'll be covering off a number of items today. It's going to be, we're hoping to finish just before 2:30 to allow us some time for Q&A, but we're just going to go through a little bit of what is Vevox, because I'm very conscious that there's some people on the call who might not be aware of what Vevox is. I do know there are a lot of people on the call who will be very familiar with what Microsoft Teams is, because probably you're using it day in, day out. We're then going to look at sort of different applications and different types of meetings that you might run within your organizations, and how the Vevox and Microsoft Teams combined could add some level of interactivity and engagement to those meetings. And we're going to finish off with a case study at the end. So what it wouldn't be right if we didn't have some of our own technology to get some thoughts and opinions from yourself. So there's a couple of ways you can interact with us today. First and foremost, if you are using Microsoft Teams and you have the Vevox app available to you, you will see a little icon up here, little sort of bars where you can expand that, and that will open up Vevox in the sidebar within your Microsoft Teams event, okay? For those of you who can't see that, not to worry, you can still engage with us. We're still very keen to hear your thoughts and opinions. And all we want you to do is just scan that QR code with your mobile device camera, and that will take you directly into the Vevox meeting that we're using today to enable you to participate in polls, complete a survey, and ask any questions that you might have of myself and Neil. The third method is you can actually go to any browser, be it on your desktop or on your mobile, and type in vevox.app, and then there's a unique ID number, which is 143-406-255. Okay, so a number of ways to access Vevox today to engage in our meeting. And if you, we'll be moving on now, but if you can't access that, the instructions will be on future slides as well, okay? Whilst, Microsoft Teams itself has a number of sort of engagement features, we're going to ask you to submit any questions that you have via the Vevox platform. Okay, so these are all anonymized, so you can send any questions that you might have, and once they've come through, they will be published to the feed. And please like any of those submitted, and we'll get them answered at the end of the session, and we'll be crowdsourcing the best questions near the end. But they are totally anonymous as well. Okay. So we're going to kickstart with a vote and practice what we preach. So we wanted to ask you within your organisation, does your organisation allow the use of third-party apps in Microsoft Teams? So nice and simply, yes, no, unsure. Okay. Now, for those of you who aren't using the Teams plugin today, there's a little image down the right-hand side of each of the slides to depict what that might look like in the Teams app. Okay, so I can see at the moment we have 31 polls in. What we're going to do is we'll close that vote and it will display the results within PowerPoint like so. Good stuff. Okay, so interestingly, around 85% of your organisation allow the use of third-party apps in Microsoft Teams. 2% say no, and around 12% of you are probably unsure. Now, this is sort of typically of what we've seen in the market right now in the workplace engagement market. What happened at the start of the pandemic, many organizations were just finding solutions for people to be able to remote work. And so there was a lot of publicity around Zoom, around WebEx, and obviously Microsoft Teams. But what we're seeing now as 2020 has progressed is many organizations have taken Microsoft Teams as their de facto choice of a remote meeting platform. But what we're also seeing is many organizations starting to leverage third-party apps within their Teams ecosystems to provide a greater level of productivity for their employees in the workplace. What I want you to do now is another type of poll to get some feedback from you guys, is just ask here, what are your top 3 priorities within your team right now. So this is a kind of a word poll question. So it's a okay. So in your app, you will now see that the poll is opened. And what I want you to enter in now, your top most 3 important priorities in your team right now. So this is a word cloud, as I said. Type them in, submit them, and then we'll display what the word cloud might look like. Okay.
There we go. It's all ticking up correctly on the slide now, Rob.
Oh, thank you. Good stuff. Okay, we'll close that quickly and then let's have a look at what are top priorities in our teams right now. Good stuff. So overall, we can see this workout build. Most people, the priority is engagement. Absolutely right, and rightly so. Everybody is working in a remote world at the moment, so it's important to keep our employees engaged in what we're trying to do within our organisation. A lot of words there around collaboration, communication, interactivity, knowledge, interaction, and also most importantly, mental health as well. So what I'm going to do now is just literally touch on some theory around how do we run effective meetings, and we looked at some psychological papers prior to today's webinar, and we took some reports from the Harvard Business Review, who actually categorized the meetings into 3 sort of pots, if you like. They say that if you want to accomplish something in your remote meetings, then the best thing to do is to limit the number of people to no more than 8 people. Okay. They also say that if you're looking at sort of brainstorming ideas and you want to participate in learning, then perhaps the optimum number is slightly more, on average around sort of 18 people within your meeting. And these types of meetings might be things such as your departmental meetings, lectures, classes, seminars, training, and obviously internal and external client meetings. And we ourselves at Vevox use this on a regular. We have 2 weekly meetings, which the company-wide meetings, where we do some brainstorming and learning as well. Okay, but there are also those larger meetings, which might be 30, 40 people plus, up to 250 if you're using Teams, where your main directive and objective of those meetings is to communicate a strategy or rally the troops up, so to speak, and to enable them to capture feedback into the thoughts and opinions of that workforce. And those things might be like town hall meetings or indeed large conferences. So what we're going to do now is look at how the combined power of Vevox and Microsoft Teams can be used to support those objectives in each of those meeting types. Over to you, Neil.
Cool. Thank you very much, Rob. Just for those of you who joined late, very quickly, the joining instructions, if you can't see the Teams app, just up the top there, vevox.app, and if you could type in that 9-digit ID, it'd be great to get some of your responses. I've just got a couple of polls to ask you, but I'd really like to know how many Teams meetings do you attend each day on average? If you could put a number in between 0 and 20 and click send, that would be fantastic. I've been running this question a few times over January, and I've had varying results. I think the largest I've seen at the moment is 20 Teams meetings a day. I'm hoping we don't see too much of that today, but I'd be just interesting to hear your response on this, because this leads nicely into my next slides. Just going to give that another few seconds. Go on, Rob. Let's close this one off and take a look at the results. Wonderful. Okay, this is a lot lower than I've been seeing, which is wonderful, and I'm really happy. We've got an average here of 4.49, and I say I'm happy. Actually, that's still quite a lot of Teams meetings that we're attending each day. There's a likelihood that we've got other meetings that we're attending as well, perhaps via Zoom or other different parties. But this is great to see that around 4.5 meetings a day in Teams is a high amount, and this leads nicely into my next slide. Thank you. So a typical meeting attention curve, attention against time, and I think this is probably something we can all relate to a little bit. Obviously, with every meeting, the ideal thing to do is to start with some sort of high impact introduction. That could be something like a large statement, some really bold contents to the meeting, or something like a word cloud that we did today, where we might want to get everybody involved initially. Of course, then typically after there, things start to drop off slightly. Now, we've had you do a couple of polls. I suspect there's some of you that are around this point in the curve already. And of course, course, it can just get worse depending on how long the meeting goes on for. So the next step, and I will be certain that at least one person on this call's done this already, has checked their phone. 69% of attendees check their emails. Hands up, I'm terribly guilty of this. I do check my emails fairly regularly, and of course in those longer meetings I want to know what's going on. It does get worse. So after this, of course, the next step in those really long meetings, and these numbers have been taken from proper studies that have taken place by Korn Ferry and Harvard Business Review. 39% of attendees doze off at meetings. I have done that once, last year, just once. But I do fall into that statistic. I won't tell you which meeting that was, but it was a particularly long meeting. Maybe a few of you can relate to that. But every meeting should end with quite a strong conclusion. Typically, at the moment, some sort of Q&A works very, very well. And of course, where that little engagement piece takes place, there's typically a little bit more attention that takes place from your participants. So if I may, I'd like to ask you another polling question. What percent of the meetings that you're attending, so on that average of 4.5 meetings a day, do you actively participate in? So if you could put a number, please, between 0 and 100 and click send, that would be fantastic. The joining instructions still up the top there for anybody who's not managed to get on Vevox yet. You may see the little logo at the top of your screen in Teams. The likelihood is you can't. And if that's the case, please take your phone out, go to Vevox.app, put in that number. I'd like to just know the percentage of the meetings that you can actively participate in. Wonderful. I can see 55 people connected, 40 responses in. Let's close that off, Rob. Wonderful. Okay, that's really good. And this sort of follows a trend that we've been seeing, especially since April last year when we all went remote. Actually, there are quite a lot of platforms that have active participation in already. I think certainly from a Q&A perspective, that's something that's really encouraged at the moment. And of course, the more meetings that you get to participate in, the easier it is, especially when you're all completely remote or sitting away from your computer and you don't have that normal interaction that you might have in a meeting. The average here being 66.25% of meetings that you get to participate in, which is wonderful, which leads me on to my next slide really nicely. So looking at this attention against time and how we can avoid that dreaded curve in the middle, that dip. What we need is what we class as a disruptive meeting. Actually, those are the meetings that 64.25% of you are currently attending. Excuse me if I got that slightly wrong. But this disruptive curve here, so this is where you'd introduce other things into your meeting to re-engage with your audience. We have that high impact introduction. Like I said, for the purposes of today, we ran a nice word cloud. That could be that high impact statement that you have at the beginning. Further along though in your meeting, it's nice to have something like a live poll. That's what we've been using today. Of course, there's plenty of polling platforms out there and some that you can get in Teams already, but it's nice to have that interaction just to engage your audience again. A little bit further along, so this is when people may start to doze off in those longer meetings. Actually, that Q&A that has been sitting right at the end of your sessions, if you get the opportunity, just a short Q&A mid-session, answer questions up to that point that have been coming through, even if it's just the top 2 most liked questions. They're relevant to the content that you've just covered. So if you're able just to split your session up slightly by covering a couple of those off, it will engage your audience again. And of course, further along, you might like to introduce something like some sort of a quiz or some sort of knowledge check, either on the contents you've just covered or something a little bit more fun, just to re-energize your audience a little bit more. And then, of course, towards the end, you might still do your Q&A and perhaps run a short pulse feedback survey just to see how you can improve those meetings in the future and change that curve slightly. Now, I'm not suggesting you use all of these in every single meeting because, of course, you'd never get through the contents if you did that. But what I would suggest is if you can introduce a couple of these per meeting, it'll just make everything hopefully a little bit more enjoyable for everybody and avoid that little dip at the bottom of the curve there. Now, we might introduce a little Q&A at this point, but for the purposes of time today and conscious that we are very low on time already, I'm going to pass back to Rob and we'll try and look at the Q&A at the end of this session.
Thank you, Neil. So just to cover off a little bit of our relationship with Microsoft and why we've developed this integration with Microsoft Teams. Now, as I said at the start, what's kind of happened over the last year is Microsoft Teams has become the de facto remote meeting tool for many organizations. And Microsoft themselves are investing heavily in third-party applications like ours to support the overall sort of remote productivity of the workforce, to try and emulate some of those moments when we are all in an office where we can all work together, but in an online environment. And what we've combined together is a tool which allows zero barriers to entry, which in turn leads to higher participation rates, more focused participation in that people aren't being distracted by other things on their phones, and ultimately better, more interactive and engaged meetings. We're also working quite heavily in conjunction with Microsoft themselves to support some of these organizations that you see on the screen here in helping them create better, more engaging and interactive meetings to make them more enjoyable experience and productive meeting for the employees across those organizations. Okay. And whilst some of the Microsoft Teams themselves have some features in them, engagement features in them, the partnership itself allow us to have some specific features within Vevox, which to overall enlighten the sort of levels of engagement. So what we've experienced today is that instant feedback mechanism to capture feedback in real time of what people are thinking, to be able to spark some discussion and debate in those meetings. It's being used extensively to be able to measure sentiment across the organization. More important now than ever, it's important that we're listening to what our employees and colleagues are thinking so that we can measure the sentiment and address that if we need to. And also the reaffirming the key learnings element. So if there was some key points within your presentation that you want your audience to think about and to take away, then a quiz feature, as Neil mentioned, is a great way to do that. Now, all of these sort of features that I'm talking about here, these applications, can be applied in all different sizes of meetings, whether they be small, medium or large meetings that we talked about at the outset. However, there are some other specific features which are probably more designed for those sort of smaller meetings to improve meeting efficiencies, to give some people back some precious time in their day to be able to do other things. So we're able to take the Q&A board, for example, and to capture ideas and brainstorm ideas and to prioritize those ideas. We're able to use advanced voting capabilities to do some rapid decision making, to be able to cherry pick what our quick wins might be, if you like. And also we're able to capture all of the data that is produced within our meeting, analysed it in real time to be able to make informed decisions. And we've got a very rich integration with all of the data, insights, and analytics that are available to you. Okay. Just want to touch now near the end before we answer some of the questions that have come in on a case study that we worked with a technology client in the last 4 weeks. Their objective was to try to develop a marketing plan for 2021 that everyone was bought into. Okay, they went through this process in 2020 at the start of 2020, and it was a 2-day workshop in a face-to-face environment. So they wanted to develop this plan, co-develop this plan, everyone bought into it, but also make sure that people are engaged in an online environment. What we did was we developed 2 sessions, 2 1-hour sessions. Session 1 was literally a brain dump of everyone's ideas around what the marketing campaign should look like. Dump them all down. I think there was around 50 ideas submitted. And then the second part of that 1-hour session was to prioritize those ideas through using the upvote feature. So we took 50 ideas and we condensed it down to 10. Okay. The 10 ideas were then taken for session 2 to then vote on them versus their impact versus the effort of what it would be to implement them. And the outcome of that session, which was 2 1-hour sessions, there was co-developed marketing strategy for 2021 and campaigns, and a list of prioritized activities based on impact versus effort were identified to be able to identify what those quick wins might look like. Okay. So that's just an example of, again, how you might want to use features of the application within Microsoft Teams to achieve that outcome. What we're going to do now then, right on time, we have about 5 or 6 minutes left. We're going to go straight to the Q&A board. Before we do, I just want to remind everyone that your feedback is really important to us. We want to improve the webinars and make them as relevant to you guys as possible. So there is a survey published in the Vevox application. And if you can take some time to complete that, that would be amazing. What I'm going to do now is jump to the Q&A board. Okay, there we go. Okay, so question 1. So great that everyone's been liking these. So this display is we're just sorting them by likes. First question, is it possible to run Vevox Teams app in a non-anonymous fashion? Thinking from an educational perspective, if I expand that, could I use instructors who gave away which responses? Yes, absolutely. So some of the power is in the anonymity of the platform. Even when it's integrated with Microsoft Teams, the sidebar is anonymous, but you can get people to log in using, have profiles set up so they have their, can identify their responses by individual if indeed you wanted to. Okay. Next question. How do I know from presentation end that my Vevox Teams is connected to Vevox? So how it basically works is when you set up your meeting in advance, you're asked to add in the Microsoft Teams app, and then you connect your Vevox meeting through the 9-digit code, and it's connected there. You can also, if you set your meeting up in advance, you will be able to have a look in the meeting, and Vevox is live even before the meeting starts, not just during the actual live meeting itself. So provided it's added prior to the meeting, people will be able to see it. I hope that answers that question. Question here, if the word cloud shows in big letters, does this mean a lot of people key in the same word? Absolutely. Yeah, apologies, I probably should have explained that. The word cloud is designed that the frequency of the word, how often it is submitted, it obviously expands it larger on the screen. Cool. If I have PowerPoint add-in on my laptop and create presentation there, can I then run polls from slides into any computer? Neil, do you want to answer that? I think, sorry to put you on the spot, Neil, but
no, that's fine. If I have PowerPoint added on my laptop and create a presentation there, can I then run polls from those slides from any computer? You can, but you would need to have the Vevox plugin on that other machine as well. So when you go into your slides, you'd open up, you connect to Vevox, and then you'll be able to access the polling and everything from there. So you wouldn't need to have that plugin on multiple machines to do that.
Good stuff. Would you be happy to share those slides? Yeah, absolutely. So we will be sending these out hopefully by the end of today, and we'll include the links to some of the research that we've provided as well. So there should be in your inbox certainly by the end of today. Will Vevox be able to support an upcoming large meetings which are up to 1,000 attendees? Yes, absolutely. We can, I believe the standard license is 1,500 attendees, but you can boost it up to 5,000 meetings. And if there are even bigger meetings, which obviously with some organizations there are, you can contact us and we can certainly support the extra large meeting, shall we say. Hope that answers that. Using Vevox integrated with a text question, but the platform seems to lose some of the responses.
Sorry, Rob, I saw this question and I left it in. I think whoever sent this through, if you could contact us directly or email support@vevox.com, it'd be just interesting to look at this particular problem for you. This isn't a known issue as far as I'm aware, but if you could contact us directly, we'll look to get that resolved with you. Good
stuff. Cool. Now, one of the top tips about running remote meetings is actually to not run over. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to leave the Q&A there for a minute and just wrap up today. I just want to say thank you so much for joining us today. Just a reminder to complete the survey in Vevox if you haven't done so already. I want to thank Neil for co-presenting with me. And if there's anything that we can help with, obviously we'll have all of our details. Thank you for joining.
Yeah, cool. That's great. Thanks very much, Rob. And just a reminder, if you could fill in the survey that you see in Vevox, that would be very helpful for us. If you've got questions that we didn't manage to answer, there is an opportunity to put your email in there and we can contact you directly with the responses to your questions.
Thank you.